Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. Brittney Griner pleads guilty in Russia as the United States works to secure her release. And the penalty phase will soon begin for the Parkland school shooter.
There is no good other explanation for using a Nazi symbol to be able to display at the time where you've just murdered 17 people and wounded 17 others.
What evidence defense attorneys want excluded from the coming trial. Plus, after weeks as a fugitive from the law and an illegal flight out of the country, a Texas woman is charged in the murder of a professional cyclist, Mo Wilson. And later, the murder of Nipsey Hussle.
The people of the state of California versus Eric Ronald Holder Jr. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of the crime of first-degree murder.
A California jury seals the fate of defendant Eric Holder. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm your host, Brian Buckmire. American basketball star Brittney Griner pleads guilty to drug charges in Russia 5 months after she's detained overseas. This comes as news circulates that the United States may exchange Griner for Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout, who was sentenced to 25 years in a United States federal prison in 2012. Griner's Russian trial began last Friday, months after she was arrested at a Russian airport, when less than a gram of cannabis oil was allegedly discovered in her luggage. While Griner pled guilty to the charges, she denies that she intentionally broke the law. Griner indicated she plans to testify in the trial, but says she needs time to prepare. A Russian judge previously ordered Griner remain in the country until the trial is concluded. If convicted, she faces 10 years behind bars. But back in the United States, President Biden received a handwritten letter from Griner urging him not to forget her. After this, President Biden spoke with Griner's wife, saying he is working to secure her release. At the same time, the Kremlin is accused of using Griner as a political pawn, while the United States maintains she was wrongfully detained. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Neama Rahmani and co-host Terri Austin. Neama, Griner has pled guilty, but says she didn't intend to pack the less than 1 gram of cannabis oil in her bag. Could that help her in sentencing?
Yes, it can. Obviously, this case is entirely political, right? I mean, there's no question that Russia is retaliating for the U.S. support of Ukraine and trying to gain leverage in some sort of prisoner swap. But turning to the legal aspect of it, Russian law is interesting in that even if you plead, you still go to trial. So this is a mitigation play. Obviously, 10 years is way too high for possession of a small amount of drugs in any country. So I think that's what Brittney's trying to do here. Play the mitigation card, not actually try to defend the case on the merits. Turns out she's doing what we would call here an Alford plea, basically saying, hey, I'm not going to contest the charges, but I'm not going to defend them either.
Yeah. Terri, do you think the United States should participate in negotiations for the release of prisoners in Russia and around the world?
Absolutely. You know, obviously our president is given the power under Article 2 of the Constitution, and those powers include the right to negotiate. He also obviously is the commander-in-chief. He signs bills into law, but that negotiation right to talk about what's going on in our country and foreign countries includes making sure he can negotiate the release of prisoners. He's done this before. In April, he just negotiated the release of Trevor Reed, who was a U.S. Marine. He could very well do the same thing. You mentioned Viktor Bout, and perhaps we could get Brittney Griner out with the release of Viktor Bout. But I will say that I think that he should be looking at other people too, and I think he is, just because Brittney Griner is very famous. He should also look at people who are not as famous, and hopefully he will do that, and that includes Paul Whelan, who is also a U.S. Marine, and he is imprisoned there. So hopefully he can get multiple people out of Russia. Absolutely,
and hopes that, as you said, both Whelan and Griner can come back home safely. And in Colorado, jurors hear from the medical examiner in the double murder trial of Kevin Dean Eastman as he faces charges in the deaths of his ex-girlfriend and her new lover. Eastman is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, tampering with a deceased body, and tampering with physical evidence. Authorities say Eastman killed his ex-girlfriend Heather Frank and local Greeley, Colorado musician Stanley Scott Sessions on separate days in February of 2020, in what prosecutors say appears to have been a love triangle. Eastman previously told investigators he went to Frank's apartment to talk about getting back together, but she told him to leave because she had a date. At a preliminary hearing months after the deaths, prosecutors called the throat-slitting killing of Sessions an ambush and that Eastman fatally shot Frank to silence the only witness to Sessions' murder. Before Frank's body was found, she and Eastman both had arrest warrants in connection to Sessions' murder. Investigators say Eastman also burned Sessions' body and allegedly was preparing to burn Frank's body when law enforcement arrested him at a gas station. The medical examiner testified Wednesday, sharing the graphic details of Sessions' fatal injuries.
For Mr. Sessions, one of your diagnoses was sharp force injury to the neck and head. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell the jury, with regard to this picture, what you're talking about when you talk about a sharp force injury to the neck and head.
In this photograph, you can see that his neck has been cut here kind of superficially just to the muscle, and then here much deeper. So that is a sharp force injury to the neck that we described.
This is from, I think, the back of the head?
That's correct. And it shows, okay.
Go ahead. I think that might give you a better way to...
It shows how deep this wound is on the side and the back of the neck. It actually goes to the vertebrae, the cervical bone in the center of the neck.
What kind of force has to be applied in order to create this type of an injury?
It would depend on the sharpness of the knife. I can't give you a numeric designation, but it would require a steady, pretty hard cut.
Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, after more than 40 days on the run, a Texas woman is charged in the death of a professional cyclist. But first, the Parkland school shooter's coming penalty phase. What defense attorneys want excluded from the trial. Welcome back. Defense attorneys for the Parkland school shooter want to exclude his past use of swastikas, racial slurs, and animal abuse at the coming penalty phase for their client. Back in 2018, the gunman opened fire at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. 17 people were killed and 17 more injured. Last October, the gunman pled guilty to all charges. After a lengthy jury selection and multiple delays, the upcoming death penalty trial is expected to begin on July 18th. At a hearing on Wednesday, defense attorneys worked to exclude portions of the shooter's past from the coming trial. Prosecutors say a swastika was etched on the AR-15 used in the shooting and also on the shooter's boots. On top of that, he had a racial slur on his backpack. His internet history showed searches for mass killings, child pornography, and animal abuse. At Wednesday's hearing, a forensic psychologist testified that some of the shooter's actions support a mental health diagnosis.
What evidence do you have that he was indifferent to or rationalizing having done this to hurt someone else?
There is no good other explanation for using a Nazi symbol to be able to display at the time where you've just murdered 17 people and wounded 17 others, and leaving that on an open display for people to see to cause an emotional reaction in them, and to have a lack of feeling or content about how those people might react in some way and to feel badly about what their reactions might be, just not about shooting and killing people, but also in seeing that kind of a symbol. I think there's no better example, except in his other social media posts, about lack of remorse and guilt.
Okay, so you're assuming that because he put it on there when he went to commit this crime and left it there, that was a conscious decision to further hurt people when it was found?
I think
Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think it's attention seeking, but I think that to not appreciate the impact that and other images and other words might have, I think that's a hallmark of antisocial personality disorder. So I'd say in totality, the social media posts, including the swastikas, and how he's chosen to use those and what he's spoken to people about in those media posts, I think is a very important opening of the window into his brain about how he thinks about these images and his lack of ability to show empathy and remorse.
Right now, there's no word when Judge Elizabeth Schreier will make a ruling on the defense's motion. Terri, how do you think the judge will rule on the defense motion to exclude this type of evidence?
You know, the whole question, obviously, in all of these evidentiary questions is what's more probative or prejudicial? And I think he's going to look individually at each and every piece of evidence. So, for instance, on the racial slur and the internet searches for mass killings, on the swastikas, I do think the judge is going to say that's probative. And look, we're looking here at whether it's life or death, and I do think those are aggravating circumstances. As for the child pornography, the animal abuse, I think the judge is going to say that's not really relevant, and so perhaps that will stay out. So I think it'll be a split motion.
President Neama, those are kind of the standards that Terri have laid out for us, but whose argument for including or excluding evidence seems more persuasive to you?
The states, Brian, and that's not just because I'm a former federal prosecutor. Look, judges have a lot more leeway in the penalty phase. We know the defense is going to bring in everything, right? Cruz's alleged fetal alcohol syndrome. We talked about, his antisocial personality, sort of borderline personality, sort of the fact that he was bullied, maybe rejected by a girl. All this is going to come in mitigation, but the state has to prove an aggravating factor, and they got to prove it unanimously. If even one juror disagrees, they're not going to get a death sentence. So I think the swastikas, I think the racial slurs where he said he wants to kill as many black people as possible, and other evidence. Let's not forget, he attacked a prison guard while he was in custody in this case. It's all going to come in. It's all relevant. So I think the state has the better argument here.
Yeah, I would agree as well. But I also kind of agree with Terri only in that one part of the child abuse and the child pornography. I'm not sure if that comes in, but I think everything else does. Of course, we'll continue with reporting and giving you those updates as to what evidence does and doesn't come into the Parkland School shooter case. And the trial for the Parkland School resource officer, Scot Peterson, is delayed due to potential witness complications. The former Broward County Sheriff's deputy was the school resource officer at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School at the time of the Parkland School shooting. After the incident, he was criticized, fired, and eventually charged for failing to confront the Parkland School shooter before he killed 17 and wounded 17 others. The judge Thursday said his trial should be delayed as to not have both his and the Parkland School shooter's trials going at the same time, which could cause conflicts with crossover witnesses. His trial was set for September. The Parkland School shooter penalty phase trial is expected to last through October. Peterson faces child neglect, culpable negligence, and perjury charges. If convicted, he faces a max sentence of nearly 100 years. The former deputy's trial is now set for February of 2023. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, a verdict is handed down for the man charged in the murder of Nipsey Hussle. Plus, the love triangle captivating the nation. We head to Texas, where a woman is finally charged in the murder of a professional cyclist. Welcome back. After more than 40 days on the run overseas, yoga teacher Caitlin Armstrong is charged with the murder of professional cyclist Mo Wilson. 34-year-old Armstrong was arrested in Costa Rica on June 29th after investigators say she fled the country for her involvement in Wilson's death. Wilson, whose real name is Anna Mariah, was shot and killed on May 11th. Investigators say she may have dated Caitlin Armstrong's boyfriend while the two were on a break, though the boyfriend maintains it was a platonic relationship. After Texas authorities questioned Armstrong, she sold her vehicle to a dealership and boarded a plane. Investigators believe Armstrong used her sister's passport to leave the country and fly to Costa Rica. Once there, Armstrong altered her appearance by dyeing her hair and undergoing cosmetic surgery. After her arrest in Costa Rica, Armstrong was sent back to the United States and booked into the Travis County Jail in Austin, Texas. She's being held on $3.5 million bond. Terri, the current bond is extremely high, but should there be any bond set in this case at all?
You know, Brian, there are certain types of cases, in my opinion, where no amount of bond would have been sufficient. I think she should have gotten no bond. She should have been remanded straight to prison. She's clearly not a threat of society, so I don't think that's the issue, but I do think she's a flight risk. Obviously, she fled to Costa Rica. She changed her appearance so much so that she got surgery. I mean, obviously dyeing her hair. She used her sister's identity. All of these things show that she will go to great lengths to hide, to run, to not face charges. So if she did it once, I think she'd do it again. And I think the court would have been justified in saying, no bond at all. Now, the good news is it's such a high amount, I don't think it will ever be met. And I think she will remain in jail until the case is tried.
Yeah, Neama, I'm sure you've had that situation where you say, Your Honor, my client's not a flight risk, and the judge is like, she literally flew out of the country. The bond makes sense there in some sense. Neama, I'm struggling to see both sides of this potential trial here. Is there a defense here, or do you think the defense attorneys are merely just looking for the best plea? Either way, what can they argue in her favor?
Yeah, there's really no defense here, right? It's just a case about, getting the best possible deal, avoiding a life sentence, getting some mitigation. She's obviously very young because Armstrong's in for a world of hurt here, not just state prison, state murder charges, and which will likely get her in state prison. There's a federal hold as well. So this is one of those rare cases where the feds may come after her. Obviously, U.S. Marshals had to track her down, another country, get her extradited. So this is not a defensible case. Hopefully, if you're her lawyers, you can come up with some global resolution to get her out of prison, hopefully in 20, 25 years. But that's the best it's going to get for her.
Yeah, there's a reason why they call it pleading, because she might do a lot of pleading in this case to try to get the best offer possible, if that's even open to her. Well, when we come back, a jury's decision is handed down in California in the case of Eric Holder as he's tried for the murder of rapper Nipsey Hussle. Welcome back. Reality TV star Jerry Harris of the Netflix show Cheer is sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for sex crimes involving children. The sentence was handed down on Wednesday. In September of 2020. Harris was arrested on charges in the production of child pornography and for soliciting sex and sexually explicit images for minors. In February of this year, he pled guilty to charges of child pornography and crossing state lines to engage in sex with a child. Harris admitted to exchanging sexual images with upwards of 15 children in 3 different states. Harris admitted he knew the children were underage at the time. While Harris's team argues for a 6-year sentence, prosecutors advocated for a 15-year sentence. In the end, a federal judge handed down a 12-year sentence with 8 years of supervised release. The judge noted Harris used his celebrity status and wealth to manipulate and exploit children. And a man on trial for killing California rapper Nipsey Hussle faces a sentence of life in prison after a jury convicted Eric Holder Jr. of first-degree murder this week. 33-year-old Nipsey Hussle was shot and killed in March of 2019 in front of the rapper's Marathon clothing store in Los Angeles. His accused killer finally faced a jury trial after 3 years of delays. Prosecutors say Holder shot Nipsey Hussle after the 2 men got into a dispute when the rapper accused him of being a snitch. A medical examiner found the rapper was shot at least 10 times, with the bullets piercing his lungs and severing his spinal cord. After less than 2 days of deliberations, on Wednesday, a jury found Holder Jr. guilty of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and assault with a deadly weapon. His defense attorney argued throughout the trial that his client didn't deny shooting Nipsey Hussle, only that the fatal shooting wasn't premeditated. Wednesday afternoon, the clerk read the jury's decision before the court.
Clerk, please read the verdicts.
In the Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, Department 104, the people of the state of California versus Eric Ronald Holder Jr., case number BA 475908. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Eric Ronald Holder Jr., guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Ermias Ashgadam in violation of Penal Code Section 187, subsection A, of felony as charged in count 1 of the indictment.
All right, this is the best part about Law and Crime Daily. I get to ask an LA lawyer about an LA case, so who better than Neama to ask? Neama, the murder charge for Nipsey Hussle, that seemed like a slam dunk, easy to figure out for the prosecutor. But for the 2 bystanders Holder Jr. shot, he was charged with attempted murder, but he was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. Why do you think that was?
It's an inconsistent verdict, Brian, because Holder's defense was that Nipsey Hussle called him a snitch, and that provoked him such that, a reasonable person would have acted the way he did. Kind of like when you walk in on your significant other in bed with someone else. You go into that blind rage. Well, the jury said that no, it was premeditated with respect to Nipsey Hussle. He went back, got a gun. There's several minutes that passed, but it was provoked sufficiently with respect to the other two. Not going to matter because the judge wasn't going to run the sentences consecutively anyway. It would be concurrent sentence, but doesn't make sense where you find that one was sufficiently provoked, but one was, or two weren't. So.
Yeah. Maybe he was trying to hit Nipsey, but those two people just happened to be there. I don't know, but that's what the jury came up with. Terri, you were working in LA when Nipsey Hussle was shot, and you saw the reaction of the community. How do you think the community will respond to this conviction?
Brian, you're right. That reaction at the time of the shooting was severe. It was substantial. And at the time I was actually teaching, and we couldn't talk about anything else that entire day because these kids who were in their early 20s really were affected by this. You have to remember that Hussle rose above his circumstances. He started out as a gang member, actually the same gang that Eric Holder Jr. was in, but he became a rapper. He actually was Grammy nominated, and he was an inspiration to his community. He bought property, he opened businesses, he hired people, he gave others an opportunity, the same type of opportunity he actually didn't have. So he was well loved, and I think this verdict is going to help.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.